welcome back, everybody. We've been going through current events with youth group. If you've been following along here on YouTube, or if you've been a part of our youth group discussion on Zoom on Thursday nights. And this week we're talking about our current event that was brought up by one of our students is global warming, which isn't actually necessarily a current event, but it's an ongoing current event, I guess. It's been going on for several years, 20 plus years that it's been talked about, but it is in the news, especially with politics and presidential campaigns and stuff like that. But if you're interested in this or into this, maybe this would be something that would be helpful for you. I said last week that I'd have a guest or someone else with us so that you weren't just listening to me. So we have one of our students, also my daughter, Jasmine.
Hello.
So she's going to listen in and maybe chime in a little bit as she's been in her classes. Her teachers have been talking about global warming too. One thing to consider when talking about global warming is there are worldviews, different worldviews that people come from. So most teachers are going to come from it with a secular, humanistic worldview. I happen to come at it from a biblical worldview, so we're going to go through what I guess that looks like and kind of offer that as part of the discussion. And if you can't tell, I am not a scientist. I'm not an expert in global warming. So I needed to consult someone else who was an expert. And one resource that I like to go to that I'll put in the links below is answersingenesis.org. They have a ton of information on there. I think when I searched for global warming, there was either 2,000 or 4,000 articles that came up. So this one was one that happened to come from the surface to the surface. So I'm actually just going to go through what this guy said in it's actually a chapter in one of the books. So the book is the New Answers Book 3, and the author is Michael J. Ord. And the chapter title is Man the Cause of Global Warming? So good question. That's kind of what goes into the discussion when we talk about global warming is mankind the cause of global warming? Okay, so the first thing, just a couple of notes to start off with, is that God created all things and he's in control. So that is coming at it from a biblical worldview. That's how I view the world, and that's what I believe. So that goes into this discussion. The first thing that this guy, Ord, said in his chapter was that man is a steward of God's creation, and I would agree with that. So if God created all things, he put people on the earth, he created people, but he created people to be good stewards of what he created. So Jasmine's going to read a couple of verses here. So Genesis 1:26 through 28, please. And then after that, 2:15.
Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created him. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and over every living creature that moves on the ground."
Okay, so be fruitful, increase in number. He put us in charge of the animals and the ground. And then 2:15 adds to that. What does 2:15 say?
It says, "The Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it."
Okay. And then the second point to talk about as we get started here is that Christians are to test all things. So coming at this from a biblical worldview is just because someone says something doesn't mean it's exactly true. If I say something, I would hope that you're testing it out to see if it's true or not. My daughter, in a respectful way, I would hope that she would test to see if what I tell her is true, or what we as parents tell her is true or not. And so could you read 1 Thessalonians 5:21?
Mm-hmm. Test everything, hold on to the good.
Okay, test everything, and then hold on to the good. Then I would add Acts 17:11 talks about the Bereans were taught, instructed by Paul. Paul was telling people about Jesus, and the people in Berea were mentioned in Acts 17:11 as being of more noble character than the Thessalonians because they heard what he said and they searched the scriptures daily to find out what he said was true. So we're to test what people tell us. Secular stuff and biblical stuff too. Okay, so in his book, in this chapter, this author, Michael Ord, talks about 5 facts. And I want to just go through those 5 facts, and then there could be a discussion on that based on whether you think those are facts or not. And I think he did a good job of going through this. So fact number 1 is carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases have increased. Okay, so carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases have increased. So what I like about this is he acknowledges that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and other greenhouse gases have increased. He doesn't say it's a hoax or it's a lie, but he does admit that they have increased. So where we might come at it from a different perspective as maybe some teachers or maybe some people in office is that where that comes from. So he says that there's a couple of minor ways that these have increased. One is the burning of fossil fuels. So that's what we hear about a lot, is burning of fossil fuels since the Industrial Revolution. So that's the mankind where we've contributed to it. And the other one is tropical deforestation. So you hear a lot, probably in school, you probably heard about the trees being cut down in Brazil, especially how the tropical rainforest, that those trees being taken down has increased greenhouse gases. And that's just a belief. And what he says in his book is that trees get cut down and they then oxidize. When they decompose, they oxidize and put carbon dioxide into the air, I think is what he was saying. But trees are a renewable resource, so it's really hard to grasp how many of those trees are reproduced and how many are cut down. So it's really hard to figure out if that's a major impact. But the major impact of something that has increased carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is actually water vapor. And that's something that wasn't from mankind. So he says that it contributes to 95% of greenhouse warming. And it's a good greenhouse gas. So without it, the Earth would be about 60 degrees Fahrenheit cooler, which a lot of people would die, depending on what climate they're in, with that cooler temperature. So that's the first fact. Anything you want to say about that?
Nope, not yet.
Did you hear anything about that? Did you hear about burning fossil fuels and tropical deforestation? Maybe not those same words, but...
Not the tropical deforestation, but we did talk a little bit about fossil fuels. Not very much, though.
Did you talk about trees being cut down in Brazil? That was a big thing when I was in school. I know that was a long time ago, but...
No, mostly about the icebergs.
Okay.
Nothing.
Okay. So the second fact that he mentions is natural causes of climate change. So there's natural causes of climate change. So there's 2 that he mentions. There are short period ones and one that's a long period one. So the 2 short period ones are strong volcanic eruption. And with strong volcanic eruption, he said that there are cooler temperatures on the Earth. And that surprised me. I thought it would be the opposite. Any idea why you think there would be cooler temperatures if there's more volcanic eruption? There's lava, it's hot, so I would think it'd be hotter. But what the reasoning is because of the ash that's in the air is going to reflect the sun back up to outer space, or back up so that it doesn't reach the Earth. So there's cooler temperatures when there's more volcanic activity. The second thing is, you probably heard, is El Nino. The Nino, translated. Just kidding. The child. And that is, have you heard the term El Nino? Okay, that's been around for a while too, and that contributes to warmer temperatures, and I think it has to do, if I remember correctly, with the ocean temperatures, and when that moves around, then it warms different areas of the Earth up. Something like that, and it causes storms and stuff like that. Like I said, I'm not a scientist. I'm not an expert in this area. Don't laugh at me. I'm just trying to get the information out there. So the long period thing is sunspots, and these are cool spots in the sun that is also countered by hot spots called faculae. Can you say faculae?
Faculae.
Very good. Okay, so like I said, they're countered, so it's not always going to be a cooling time there, but it's also going to be countered by a warmer time. So this is, like I said, this is a long period natural cause of climate change, and there's two times that scientists will even go back to, and I'm going to put a chart on here if I can get it on here to this YouTube video that you can see. There's the medieval warm period from 800 to 1200 AD, and there's the Little Ice Age, or the LIA, from 1400 to 1880. So there was a time of warm. So there's even, it's not only that temperatures have been getting warmer since the beginning of Earth. That's not what's happening. It's temperatures have warmed for a period. They've cooled for a period. Now we're seeing a warming trend. We'll probably, like I said, I'm not an expert, but we'll probably see a cooling trend a few years down the road, several years. It could be 100, 200 years. I don't know. But there's these longer periods of cooling and warming caused by the cool spots and hot spots from the sun. He says, here's a couple of quotes: historical records are well correlated to the number of sunspots using proxy data. And I think what's meant by proxy data, I know I'm throwing out a lot of scientific terms there, and hopefully this isn't too boring. Some of you are into this, some of you are not. But proxy data, I think, is stuff that they didn't observe, but it's stuff that you can go back and kind of see. You can measure the ice, you can measure rings. They measure rings on trees to see what the temperatures of the Earth were at the time. So that's proxy data. And he also says variations in carbon dioxide levels were not responsible for these changes. Nicola C. Feta and Bruce West mentioned that natural cycles from the sun account for at least 50% of the 20th century global warming. So there are some scientists that say that half of global warming isn't caused by mankind at all. It's caused by these natural things that happen. With me so far?
Yep.
Any comments about that fact number 2?
Nope.
Okay. Fact number 3 is there is no consensus of scientists. So I think why he says that is some scientists will say, all scientists say this, or all scientists agree about this global warming and their interpretation of the data. But he puts in here that there is no consensus of all scientists. In fact, he mentions in this chapter that this scientist, I think it's a scientist anyway, his name is Dr. Art Robinson, has maintained a website since 1998 signed by around 20,000 scientists, saying that as of 2009 there is no scientific evidence that greenhouse gases are causing or will cause catastrophic heating of the Earth's atmosphere and disruption of the Earth's climate. And that's on petitionproject.org. And he also mentions that 2,500 of those scientists are scientists like physicists, geophysicists, climatologists, meteorologists, oceanographers, and environmental scientists, all scientists who are very qualified to talk about climate change and global warming and that sort of stuff. So not just any scientist, but so there's not a consensus of all scientists on interpretation of the data on global warming. Okay, the fourth fact, sorry, do you have any comments about fact number 3?
Nope.
Okay, fact number 4, he says that climate simulations exaggerate carbon dioxide warming. So they, scientists put it into a computer and different factors and see what they can see about the future. What trends could they see about the future? And so what they do in these simulations is what he says is they exaggerate what's going to happen in the future. And here's his reasoning. In these computer simulations, scientists double carbon dioxide. So this results in 3 to 11 degree Fahrenheit increase by, usually they say around 2100, the year 2100. So 2020 now, 80 more years, they say that the Earth's temperature could rise based on our carbon dioxide levels to being 3 more degrees to up to 11 more degrees than it is now. Have you heard anything like that?
Nope.
Okay. 11 degrees would be pretty significant as far as like a average temperature of the Earth. That'd be pretty significant.
Mm-hmm.
Be pretty warm. So what he says also is what simulators don't include are things like types of clouds and their effects, solar and infrared radiation processes, and ocean processes and ice processes. So it doesn't include other factors that can contribute to global warming or global cooling. It just puts double the carbon dioxide levels. And that comes from the Satanic Gases, Clearing the Air About Global Warming by Michaels and Bailey. Another reason he says for this fact that climate simulators exaggerate carbon dioxide warming is that carbon dioxide has increased about 30%. So carbon dioxide levels have increased about 30%. Other greenhouse gases have increased about 30% as well. So not only carbon dioxide, but there's other greenhouse gases that go into it. It's not just carbon dioxide that is greenhouse gases. Okay? And then that doesn't even include the water vapor, which is the natural greenhouse gases. Global warming is claimed to be 1.2 degrees Fahrenheit. So in the 100 years, almost 100 years that they've been measuring the Earth's temperature, it's increased by about 1.2 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
About half is from natural causes, and I'll include another figure here, hopefully, if I figure out how to do that right. That you can see that where they get that data. So if 60%, 30 plus 30, remember I mentioned 30% is carbon dioxide and 30% is other greenhouse gases, 30 plus 30 is?
60.
Good job. If 60 degrees increase in carbon dioxide causes only a 0.6 degrees Fahrenheit warming, that's half, that's mankind's portion of it. A doubling of carbon dioxide should cause a 1 degree Fahrenheit warming, is what he says. Okay? So what he's saying is it shouldn't contribute to 3 or 11 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. It should only be about 1 more degree warmer. Okay? Not anything worth really worrying about, right? I'm not worried about 1 degree, are you? I'd actually like it to be 1 more degree warmer.
Agreed.
Okay. The fifth fact that he mentioned is there are actually benefits to global warming. And you don't hear about these in the media because it's always the negative side of it, and it's always like doom and gloom. We better do something, or we're going to die.
Floods everywhere.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to die.
Exactly. Okay. So this is interesting. I had never really thought about this before, that there's benefits to global warming. One is more people die of cold than of heat. So if the Earth's going to warm, that isn't going to affect us as much as if the Earth were to cool. And he gives an example of in Europe that there were 7 times as many people that died of cold-related deaths, like freezing temperature-related deaths, than heat-related deaths. So. And the other benefit to global warming is more plant growth, because plants breathe in carbon dioxide and give us oxygen. So with more carbon dioxide in the air with global warming, then there'd be better plant growth, is what he says to that. Okay. So those were the 5 facts that he mentioned in there. And I know that global warming is such a huge topic, and there's so much out there, and there's so many opinions out there, that it's hard to cover it in 10 or 15 minutes, however long this video ends up being. So any comments that you can you think of anything?
Nope.
I know, well, you mentioned icebergs, and I guess I didn't go into that. Maybe that's something that we can talk about as a youth group, but I think I remember it. So this isn't fact related. Doesn't come from this Michael Ord guy, but I do remember, and you can fact check me if I'm wrong, I do remember hearing that, when global warming people were talking about the icebergs shrinking in the Arctic.
Mm-hmm.
But I think at the same time, I remember what we weren't hearing is the icebergs in the Antarctic were actually growing. So there's a balance there. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we learned in my history class how, I think it was like tire rubber and stuff. I don't remember exactly where, but was getting on icebergs, and icebergs that were lasting for hundreds of years were melting in just like 3 months, a lot quicker than before. So that's something we learned in my history class.
Yeah, and I wouldn't disagree that burning tire is a bad idea because going back to one of the first couple of points that I brought up is we do have a responsibility as mankind to do our best to take care of what God's given to us, because some of it is we only have it once. There are things like trees though that are renewable resources. Yeah, we can do too much by taking too many of them down, but there are companies that take trees down that replant and are doing a good job with that and being good stewards of God's creation. So we do have a responsibility, and we do have to be careful about that, and litter and recycling and that sort of stuff. But so there's a small amount of things we can do, but from this data here, it doesn't look like global warming should be as big of a deal as maybe some people bring it out to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Well, thank you for listening, and thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week.